I am from System 1, and later on I'm going to introduce to you my colleague Cheng Wee. And today, we're going to talk about ad effectiveness. But what do we really do as a company? System 1, from our roots as Brain Juicer. I think some of you are young enough to remember what Brain Juicer did a couple of years ago. So we're a 20-year-old company. And so we're a marketing science, and we had a rebranding 2 years ago. And we held ourselves accountable for profitable growth for every project that we do when we face our clients. And because of that, we work backwards in terms of how we put together solutions and approaches to have one thing in mind, building the business of our clients and also putting forward the promise of profitable growth. So today, we're going to talk about APAC-specific marketing lessons. This piece of case study has been presented at ESOMAR and was published recently at Research World. And this is specifically about APAC brands. Unfortunately though, we don't have a Vietnam-specific data set, but we do have Thailand and other neighboring countries in terms of ads. And I'm going to talk about an opportunity later on where Vietnamese clients here could participate for free when we do ad testing. Okay, let's start with a game. If you look at the two sides of the screen, which one is easier to process? Obviously the right-hand side, and then the left-hand side. And would you know the answer is top of mind? What would be 49 times 27? Okay, so it will take a bit of rewiring. It will take a bit of a baby stare where you have to look at the screen and reprocess, and sometimes it's actually a painful process. As human beings, and I think as Paul has noted earlier, we are wired in terms of spontaneous, quick decisions and fast decisions. And these two questions actually are very essential in terms of moving ahead with our presentation today. What do I feel versus what do I think? What do I feel is actually a much simpler question, yet provide a more thorough answer, or set of answers, and more actionable answers in terms of putting forward marketing solutions or probably research solutions than asking the question, what do I think? And we know this already. There's a System 1 and System 2 sides of the brain. And this has been popularized by Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And we lend so much of our work to the efforts of Daniel Kahneman and even the rebranding of our company, System 1. Basically, we think much less than we think we do think. But then again, when I started my career here in Vietnam 15 years ago, I used to ask a lot of questions on the questionnaires. And even in actual qualitative groups, I used to think that consumers actually are thinking slowly, analytically, they're very rational, and they're very conscious about these decisions. But actually they're not. So consumers are actually acting so fast, they're very intuitive, and sometimes pre-consciousness, they actually already make the decisions. If you look at those shampoo examples of Paul, when you think about the shampoo, before consciousness hits you that you're talking about shampoo, you already have some shared memory, or probably an internalization of what shampoo means to you. And that is what, or how the consumers actually are interacting with the world around them, and also with your brands. And so, all the more that it's justified that we should be looking at System 1. And personally, as Mike Crosay, being a market researcher, I actually go around Asia, or Asia Pacific, to rewrite research briefs. Because if you look at our research briefs, they haven't evolved so well in the past 20, 30 years. They're the same research brief, which are actually sometimes, or more often, penalizing a lot of our friendly research researchers in trying to provide answers. While all we know is that the consumers are actually, are thinking it so much easier, but we're belaboring ourselves thinking about system 2 types of research solutions. And today, we're going to talk about some meta-analysis, but let's begin with the conclusions. And this we know already, that our consumers are driven by top-of-mind preferences. They're very emotional than rational, and they access decisions, or they provide decisions through rapid pattern recognitions. If you've read the book, who amongst here have read the book Thinking Fast and Slow? Retain those hands. Who amongst of you have finished the book? Reading the book. Okay, you have to put it down at some point because it's quite a thorough book. What we've done is actually my boss, John Kieran, and also with other colleagues, Tom and Orlando, they actually put forward some modules and learning pieces of that book, from that book, and put it into this book, System 1, which is somehow our code of, or our reference book in terms of what we can learn from that book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and apply it into market research. As a company, System 1 only works on 3 things: branding, communication, and innovation. So the rest of the types of researches we don't do. And we focus mainly on System 1 approaches. Now, before I proceed to the framework of the meta-analysis, we looked at some of the most popular works and trusted works in terms of behavioral economics and psychology. And one of the things that we use nowadays is Paul Ekman's model on the emotions, and how emotions through facial expressions can guide us in terms of marketing science. And there are 2 things that we need to learn as we approach Paul Ekman's work. Paul Ekman is still alive. He's an American psychologist. And there are 2 things that are actually quite fundamental in trying to look at or studying, measuring emotions through facial reactions. First is the remembering self, which is basically taking into account all what you've learned as a memory. And second is the expressing self, which is when presented by a stimulus, you actually have something instantaneously that you process. So these 2 things are very essential in terms of putting forward a framework that we can use as a tool in market research. I'm going to show you an example of what we call to be the best in class in terms of Paul Ekman's work that we use at System 1, and maybe the future. We don't know, because we have our own labs in the UK, and what we do in the labs is basically look at neuroscience and also look at automation in terms of real-time coding of faces. For now, I'll show to you what we have and what could be the future. Have the volume, please. So Waitrose is a UK-based grocery store, and they do have products, and I think we see some of the products in some of the high-end stores here in Asia and also in Vietnam. And so what we've done here is basically used Paul Ekman's model, and we've added neutral. And there are gradations here also in terms of the expression. So basically we ask our respondents to view the ad 2 times, and then the second time we ask them if there are change of emotions, and they basically do a selection. So the input method is still, they have to do a space bar. They can watch it through a laptop or through their mobile phone. This one is through a camera. And it failed in several fronts. We're still doing validations, but I think what we're trying to do here is it fails on the expressing self. Particularly in Asia, for example, Japan, when people are not so expressive, they're holding back in terms of the emotions. So if you look at the study of the facial expression, it's very steady or stoic. And so therefore it fails in terms of the emotional journey, wherein actually you go through a stimulus. And so we have done this in terms of 58,000 ads to date, and we've got 19 million responses. And we studied these responses to build a database called ad ratings, which I'm going to talk about in a few. But what's important here is this could be the future. But the best in class that we're trying to hold into at the moment would be this. And it's going to be an arms race, I know, for most of the agencies and even the ecosystem, the IBM Watsons of the world, Facebook and Google, to look into this. Yeah, I presented this in China a couple of weeks ago, and they said it's going to be the Chinese who will build this. And they're going to win the next behavioral economics Nobel Award. That's what they said. Okay, now moving on to the meta-analysis. So during our rebranding in 2017, we started a database called Ad Ratings, which is basically, we've done about 58,000 ads already by now. And we work with the IPA, which is the Institute of Practitioners of Advertisers based in the UK, as well as recently with the Cannes Lions. This has been used by the Cannes Lions as the people's choice. So at Cannes you have the jury, which is the choice of the jury, but the people's choice is actually what the respondents feel, the consumers feel about the ads. And we also have Fillmore 50. We haven't done Fillmore 50 in Vietnam, but we're trying our best to cover Asia as much as possible. So if you're a client, send through to us the ads, and I'm going to talk to you about the Fillmore 50. Basically what we do here, it's syndicated, it's free, and we just test those ads, and we do 5 rating scale. If you're 3, 4, or 5, which is basically only a third or less than a third of the number of ads that we covered, you actually can command at least 1 to 1.5% profitable growth. And that's what we promised our clients for. So for the next few slides with the actual use cases around Asia Pacific, I'm going to call in my colleague Cheng Wee. She's an associate director based in Singapore to walk us through the slides.
Lester. So our ad ratings database and Film of 50 database has given us lots of meta-learnings, particularly in APAC. And one of the things we found is that the effectiveness of the ads can be cut by their duration. And so far, one of the most interesting things we found is that the most emotionally resonant ads tend to be around 30 seconds long. But increasingly, we are also seeing that brands around the world, as well as in APAC, are tending towards this idea of ultra-short ads. So, micro ads that tend to last between 5 to 10 seconds long and adapted for the digital space. And this act of it tends to cater towards the evolving human attention span, which a lot of us know is now getting shorter and shorter, and rumor has it that it's even shorter than that of a goldfish, which can be worrying, but for brands it's something to bear in mind and think about. But a question to ask ourselves then is whether these ultra short ads actually do work. Can brand building take place within 5 to 10 seconds? So when we look towards our database, it's surprisingly in Asia where we find some of the most interesting cases that shows emotionally resonant ads. And one of that is this Japanese ad from ice cream brand Sunao. Ultra short ad. So it takes a very completely no-frills approach, just showing a very visual and sensory image of just ice cream dripping off a spoon. So that is actually proving to be quite effective for the Japanese target market. But we also know that not all categories can be so sensuous like ice cream. For more regular consumer brands, for example, this ad for Minute Maid in Korea, it also did very well, just because it's able to rapidly communicate excitement and fun. Yes, so ultra short ads do have a place in APAC in terms of helping brands to grow long term. But one of the ways that we can amplify the effect of ultra short ads is through what we call this effect of fluency or rapid pattern recognition. So one of the ways to do that and achieve that effect is through the use of fluent characters or fluent devices. So these are assets that consumers relate to your brand. It could be characters, it could be logos, it could be a jingle that people are instantly familiar with. So in this year's Chinese New Year ad testing, we actually took a lot of ads from around APAC, which launched Chinese New Year campaigns, and one of them was for Coca-Cola China. And in their ads, they start these two Chinese clay doll mascots called Afu and Ajiao. And they've been constant characters in Coke China's Chinese New Year advertising ever since 2001. So when we tested it, it's not surprising that the ad actually tested very well due to the familiarity of the characters. But the other way that Coke has done very well in taking these characters is applying it throughout its various touch points, not just across its communications, but also on digital billboards, on their packaging, as well as turning it into a whole, making it into emojis that people could share over WeChat. So that kind of multimedia strategy helped to lend further effect towards their fluent characters and make it go longer. And the power of fluent devices lies not just in the fact that they are instantly recognizable cues that stand in for the brand. When you see the mascot, you know what brand it is for. But it also lies in the fact that they carry in themselves emotional resonance, that you feel something for it when you see the character. And when applied strategically in your communications, it can help your ads go much further. And the other point to note, of course, is that it spans across categories, from FMCG down to your more your less FMCG companies like Michelin and Duracell, for example. So we've seen ultra short ads working well in APAC. How about long form content? So when we look towards our database, Asia has some of the best long form emotional content out there, and we don't have to look too far towards Thailand, where Thai ads are very much praised and closely studied around the world for how they are able to so remarkably tell a story throughout the ad, usually a long ad, and using negative emotions, and then ending on a very, usually Thai-style humor, amusing way. So the ad I'm going to show you, some of you might have seen it before. It won several awards at Cannes. So it's a 3.5 minute long ad. So I'm not going to show the whole thing. We'll take a pause at the middle.
ดีครับ
ขอดูใบอนุญาตหน่อย
นี่ฮะ
ข้างหลังคนอะไรมา
อ๋อก็ผลมาก่อน
เปิด มันทั้งนั้นเลย มาจากไหน
มาจากปากครับ
แล้วจะไปไหน
ไปพุง
เข้าไม่ได้ มันแผลกเลย อย่างนี้ต้องจับ
พี่จะบ้าเหรอ
So this shows the bizarre road encounter between a patrol cop and a smuggler. And about halfway through, the twist appears where it's actually revealed that actually this smuggler might be a personification of something. And the next half of the ad is where it's actually all revealed.
งงไหมไม่งง
ควาย
หน้ามัน หน้าเราเข้าไปไม่ได้
บ้าไปแล้วถ้าเมื่อก่อนมันเข้าได้อะ
เดี๋ยวนี้ไม่ได้เขาห้าม
เขาอะใคร ไม่พี่อะใคร
ไข่โตซาน
ใครวะใคร
ไข่โตซานในผลิตภัณฑ์เสริมอาหารชัวร์จากเวอริน่า
ช่วยในการดักจับไขมัน
โฆษณาใช่ไหมใช่
อ๋อ
So as you can see, they very well take the whole 3.5 minutes and make it a very, very compelling story where you follow through. And then halfway through, you realize you get as confused as the smugglers in the ad as to what is going on before it's actually revealed that it's an ad within an ad and that they are actually personifications of food and diet pills and it's totally unexpected revelation and this ad was a 5-star winner in our database. So that goes to show that long-form emotional communications will never really go away. So what have we learned today, our key takeaways? So the more people feel, the more people buy. Emotional communication is the way to go. And if people feel nothing, they will do nothing. So the key for brands in APAC as well is to make people feel something towards your brand. And if your creative is able to elicit emotional response, you should go ahead and put money or more money behind it because it will be repaid with brand growth. Can ultra-short ads help in brand building? It might be difficult, but it's not impossible. Applying rapid pattern recognition and able to convey excitement and fun in a very fast manner will help you to do that. And one of the ways to do that is by using fluent characters, fluent devices that people can readily associate with your brand. And finally, if you have the luxury of long-form communication, look towards what the Thais have done, play with the audience emotions, and tell a compelling story. Yeah, so that's the end of the presentation.
Questions? We do have books for those who will ask questions.
For those who don't ask questions.
Okay. Yeah, Paul.
I was curious. I mean, when you monitor all the emotions in the videos, right? Then what do you do with that after that, like to the clients? Like, how do you turn that into like recommendations on how to improve it, or like what is the meaning of all these emotions? How are they used after that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So our tool, and I don't like to sound so peachy about it, but basically it's when we understand emotions, there are actually some end state emotion and there are some transitory emotions. So Paul Ekman's model has all of these states. What we're trying to do is to create a positive set of emotion. When you're trying to have an emotional journey, of course you have to induce a bit of friction so that you can actually stimulate the respondent and trigger the respondent to do some action. What we're trying to do is to create an overall happy emotion wherein you can actually have a lasting impact, more long-term to your brand. In terms of being strategic about the play of emotions, we do have an understanding of where the emotions actually hit. Like we do have spikes, an understanding of spikes through the emotional journey, and through spikes we can say you will have a short-term effect, aside from the long-term effect of the campaign. campaign or the ad. In essence, what I'm trying to do out of this technical lingo is basically we do provide clients with short-term strategy in terms of trying to change a particular behavior short-term wise, and also how to build the brand's equity long-term. Cheng Wee mentioned about how do you play colors, how do you play fluent devices, how do you play offline and online assets as part of your emotional journey, of that emotional journey wherein you can actually instill something. Like for example, for hair care, you have to induce that with something so bad that it will probably create fear or anger, like dandruff, and then provide a solution that people will be happier or satisfied. So through that journey, we actually put together some specific recommendations wherein this is the point in time where you can trigger some action, and also how to build your brand over time. Does that answer the question?
One more question.
Yes.
I'll just use one.
Yeah, Lester, thanks for sharing with us the interesting output of the facial coding graphs. So, I'm sure you have seen a lot of commercials, and we saw from that video that when it came to the last part where the girl was going to the dinner table for Christmas family gathering, the graph spiked the highest. So my question is, what are the images from your experience that spikes the maximum positive responses from the viewers?
Yep. We come from a basic premise, and thank you for that question. That basically emotion is something that we need to study within context. Because you have each one of us will have different responses to a set of emotion. That's why we need to have a set of the addressable target market able to predict what the majority actually will have as an output. Now, there are no specific set of images. It has to be within context, within culture. A 5-star ad in China may not necessarily be a 5-star ad in Vietnam. It has to be within the cultural context. But what we're trying to say to our clients is basically everyone can write business questions and research questions. Everyone can almost write an answer to those questions. But emotional response is something that you cannot predict. If you add a scent of lavender, it will trigger something to your hair care. If you add something that is quite medicinal or very lab-based, it will have to trigger a different effect on top of what you already have. So these sets of emotions would actually have to be put together in terms of what are you trying to achieve. But it's a creative work at the same time. It can be very strategic in terms of how do you play with the emotions in order to arrive at a certain business objective.